Hey guys, welcome back to Thanendorf TV, and today we're going to be looking at the BattleBots 2020 World Championship bracket. We're not going to be doing a retrospective on any of the actual matches. No, we're just going to be looking at the seeding. This was a huge point of contention in a lot of the community. People were nitpicking left and right all of the seeds and where they thought their favorite bot should have gone, who they thought should have or should not have been in the tournament. And I think we should really just slow down and take a critical look at the round of 32. Take a critical look at the actual seeding, see why which bots are placed where. And I think I've got a pretty good idea as to what the selection committee's thought process was when they were making the round of 32. Just a quick disclaimer, I don't claim to be a professional at this. I'm not some kind of know-it-all. I'm not affiliated with the BattleBots TV show in any way. I'm just a fan analyzing something that really shouldn't be analyzed. Like, this is just for fun. Don't take this seriously at all. It's just a way for me to procrastinate while I should definitely be doing my chem lab. So, that being said, let's start. I've made a couple ground rules that I think hold true in the entire tournament bracket. First, there are no rematches from Fight Night in the round of 32. These are all completely new matchups, and even though they might have happened in previous seasons, I think none of these matchups have ever happened this year. And looking at it, I don't think there are any matchups besides Whiplash versus Huge that have happened in previous years. So I think they really tried to minimize the amount that happened. So no rematches from Fight Night, and they tried not to have rematches from previous years. There are no matches between two basic vertical spinners. This one I think is really important because take a real long look at this bracket. There's no matches between two boxes with vertical spinners, and I really think that this was an intentional move. This is definitely something that they did to make the tournament more interesting. And lastly, this one should be a given, but a bot can't be placed above a bot that it lost to. Look at Sawblaze and Whiplash, very similar strength of schedule, very similar, I guess, perceived power ranking, but Sawblaze has to be above Whiplash because Sawblaze beat Whiplash in the opening match of the season, I think it was, in episode 1. So, with those rules laid out, let's get into the actual seedings. So, our first category, they're outlined or boxed in red, is the top 3. These are the 3 undefeated teams with really strong schedules and really strong wins. Hydra has to be number 1. I'm sorry, guys. It has to be Hydra. Hydra beat Witch Doctor, Huge. I know that match was really problematic for a lot of people, but you beat Huge. Bronco couldn't beat Huge. And so I think that puts him at number 1. Hydra just has to be number 1, especially because also he's a Waiachi, you know. They're kind of one of the more established teams, and with the team's history, you have to imagine that they'll be packing a little bit more of a threat. Number 2, Bloodsport. This one's also a really good choice. They had some really crazy, really cool, really flashy wins, and even though their strength of schedule wasn't quite as amazing as Hydra's, you're pulling Kronos. Like, Kronos' disc has never really worked after the first 2 hits, so it makes sense that a couple weaker fights kept Bloodsport from the number 1 seed. And then Copperhead. I forget exactly who Copperhead fought. I think it was Gigabyte, P1, and someone else. But they had a really strong season as well. Really flashy, really cool knockouts. And for that reason, they're number 3. So those are the top 3. They were the clear contenders for the top 3 at the undefeated schedule and with really awesome knockout wins and really, or not knockouts, I don't think Hydra even had any knockouts. Really dominant wins is what I mean to say. So the next category is outlined in orange, the strong 2-1s. And that's leading off with Uppercut. I mean, Uppercut and Hydra probably were the two top contenders for the number 1 seed, and with Hydra beating Uppercut, there really was nowhere else to put them. They had two really insane knockouts over Gemini and Sawblaze. Yeah, one of the craziest things that's going to be on highlight reels forever, that fireball that they put onto Sawblaze. They were the clear pick for number 4. Number 5, let me find it, Black Dragon, also solid team. 6, Endgame, they beat Tombstone in the first episode of the year. 7, Sawblaze, they lost to Uppercut and had other really strong wins. Whiplash, they lost to Sawblaze with other strong wins. Valkyrie gave us one of the most entertaining matches I think I've ever seen versus Rotators, so they're number 9. Then there's, I think, Scorpios. They also beat Tombstone, albeit in a less dramatic fashion than Endgame did. So that's why Scorpios rounds out that category at number 10. 11, 12, and 13 I called 3-0 but, and that's because Jackpot had kind of a gimmicky win where they, where Sub-Zero just kind of died, and also they definitely weren't going to win that fight, but I think Sub-Zero had a bad power switch, so Jackpot lucked out a win on that one. They rolled the dice and they, whatever the opposite of Snake Eyes is. And then Mad Catter, also solid wins. They beat Fusion, who people thought was gonna be a strong rookie. They beat Ribot pretty dominantly, I think, too. And so Mad Catter's got an undefeated record, and they got number 12, just below Jackpot, because Jackpot beat Lockjaw, who is a yearly threat. Lockjaw is always a solid robot. But we'll get to that later. And then Beta is the lowest in that category because 2 of their wins were against robots that people definitely didn't think could beat Beta, and its last win was against Rotator, which is a really close match where they didn't use their weapon really at all. And so that's why Beta's the last in the 3-0 but category. And then I think this is the biggest group in the list, good 2-1s. These are the ones that are really just middle of the pack. They're solid robots, and they've had some nice wins, but they're not the more dominant wins like the first categories were. The first 2 categories were. And so, starting off this, it has to be Lockjaw. Lockjaw's only loss was to Jackpot, the surprise rookie, and Lockjaw's always a threat whenever they come. I've said it before, Lockjaw's a really solid bot made by a really good driver and a really good builder, and so they got the first seed in this category. Then Malice and Gigabyte. People were really up in arms about Malice being so high. I'm a personal fan of Malice, and I think this is where it really shows that strength of schedule is one of the more important things. Strength of schedule and how their wins looked. I mean, yeah, you beat Axe Backwards in the first episode. It's Axe Backwards. I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret. Axe Backwards doesn't really win all that often. But their next win was against Shatter, and Shatter's a really strong robot. And even though that fight wasn't very, exciting because both weapons broke after the first hit, it was still a win over a established team in Shatter for Malice. And then their last fight was a loss to Mad Catter, undefeated Mad Catter, where it definitely looked like they were going to win, but then some black magic happened and they got stuck on their back. Gigabyte, some solid wins. Their loss was to the 3rd seeded Copperhead, and people were saying that Gigabyte should have been above Malice, but also It literally does not matter. If you flip those two seeds, it is the exact same tournament. Tantrum at 18. People weren't expecting a whole lot from Tantrum. They're most known for that time that Tombstone smashed their fist into the wall and almost caused a blackout in the box. A couple solid wins. Their win over Gamma 9 was a really entertaining match. And then Shatter. They can't be above Malice due to Rule 3. And their other matches were pretty good, and so Shatter is a really solid middle of the road, middle of the pack robot along with Ribot. And then we get into the lower end of the tournament, starting with the strong 1-2s and the weak 2-1s. So the strong 1-2s come first because you've got Tombstone. They're the highest in this category because they're Tombstone. Rotator, because their matches were very close. Valkyrie versus Rotator was a really close, really destructive match, and their beta match was a little bit controversial, so they got the edge over Witch Doctor, which I think is kind of cool because, remember, back in Season 2, Witch Doctor actually beat Rotator in 30 seconds? And so I thought it was kind of interesting that Witch Doctor actually got a lower seed than Rotator. Speaking of Witch Doctor, their only win was against Slammo, who's in the tournament. They're there. Witch Doctor lost to Hydra and Kraken, mostly because their weapon broke. I think it was a bad material. So they had to source new steel for the rest of the competition, and because of those little flukes, but people still know that Witch Doctor is a solid team. They've got a really destructive bot. They got the 23rd seed over Huge. Sub-Zero got a loss where they probably should have won because of a bad power switch, and Huge had a weird match against Hydra, who's the number 1 seed. And then, rounding out the rest of the purple category, we have Perfect Phoenix, Slammo, and Hijinks.
As you move down the list, it gets a whole lot harder to definitively rank the bots in terms of power, especially just based on their strength of schedule from this year. Huge and Sub-Zero had such different seasons. Huge had some really close losses to really strong robots and a win against Kraken, but Sub-Zero had a really dominant win over Sporkanaut, who barely functioned to begin with. How do you rank those? And so that's why I believe that down here in the bottom areas of the bracket, especially in the purple and blue sections of the bracket, they mostly made matchups based on what they thought would make for entertaining and exciting matchups. Witch Doctor versus Scorpios was a really cool match. Same with Sawblaze versus Kraken, Whiplash versus Huge, Valkyrie versus Sub-Zero. And that's why I think that rather than really nitpicking on the ranking specifically, we should be glad that they give us some really fun matches in the round of 32.
Kraken did beat Witch Doctor due to something happening with Witch Doctor's weapon where it shattered. That's actually really interesting. I'd like to see what you guys think about that, where Kraken, according to these rules, should have been placed above Witch Doctor, but is not. Perfect Phoenix, Slammo, and Hijinks, who had pretty unremarkable 2-1 records in Fight Night, but are definitely strong enough to be considered definite top 32 competitors. And then that brings us to the bottom 3. Mammoth, Gruff, and Hypershock. Mammoth is 2-1, so I guess you could consider it in the 2-1 purple category, along with Perfect Phoenix, Slammo, Hijinks, Sub-Zero. But I think Mammoth also had a 4th match that it won against Black Widow, who was in a Discovery Channel commercial for the new season. I'm not sure if that was even before the tournament, or if it factored into the decision in the top 32 at all. But Mammoth, I love Mammoth. Mammoth is the bot that inexplicably just keeps on winning. Like, you don't expect it to keep winning, it just kind of does. According to the BattleBots website, actually, they have a 54% lifetime win record with like 13 matches. That's pretty good. Like, that's not a bad record at BattleBots. So Mammoth is probably the strongest of the bottom three bots, and then our last two are Hypershock and Gruff. Gruff is 1 and 2 after it randomly died against Extinguisher, and Hypershock just, oh man, I love Hypershock, but they're just never working. And a lot of people thought that P1 should have been in the tournament. P1 was 2-1. They were actually the only 2-1 robot to not make it in the tournament, if what I've seen is correct. And whether it should be Hypershock or P1, it's really, really hard to say. Hypershock did come close to beating Byte Force that one time in 2015, so they've got that going for them. But with the matches that they were given, I don't see how P1 could have done any better. They put on a good show in the matches that they did win. Their loss was to Copperhead, so no shame there. Copperhead's got a really strong weapon especially against P1's style of robot. And I don't want to make a call on this. I think BattleBots has said that they should have done a play-in for the bottom seeds, but they didn't have time, or they couldn't due to Corona, because Corona ruins everything. Gosh. So I don't really want to comment too much on Hypershock and Gruff's seeding. I've even seen some people say that Captain Shredderator should have been in there as one of the bottom seeds. But I think that given these restrictions, which are only very rarely broken, I think that this really is the best bracket that we could have gotten. I think the moral of the story here is the seeds really aren't that important. Like, yeah, sure, obviously the bottom seeds are going to be at a significant disadvantage to the top seeds, because the bottom seeds just don't have as strong or as reliable of bots as the stronger teams. But like, Mad Catter went undefeated and put on a bunch of really good matches, and what do they get for going undefeated? They get Tombstone. Like, come on. Scorpios, for having a really good, strong season, gets Witch Doctor in the first round. Like, in the first round, Bloodsport drew a bot that was specifically designed to counter horizontal spinners. In the NFL, if you have a high seed, you get a first round bye and home field advantage amongst a bunch of other things that help your tournament run go smoother. But in BattleBots, there aren't a lot of matches per season, and it's really hard to seed these bots. And so that'll do it for this video. If you still want to see me rate the rest of the BattleBots logos, definitely go subscribe. And I will finish that as soon as I finish this chem lab. So, see you guys later.